All right, here we go, Tim. You ready?
Yeah, let's go, Michael. What do you got?
Flying to L.A. yesterday from New York. Sit down. Who's sitting next to me on the flight? Cindy Crawford. I don't say a word to her for 6 hours. You know why? Because I don't want to give her false hope. I don't want to be a tease. I'm happily married, love my wife. I didn't want her to think she had a chance with me, so I didn't even say hello. Your thoughts?
You completely wimped out. I think that's what it comes down to. You lost your...
Why? What was I going to say to her?
It's just, I mean, I'm not saying you have to hit on her, but, I mean, you could at least strike up a conversation. It's, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You sit next to
But here's my point, Tim. If I did, then she would have thought, I got a chance with this guy. I didn't want to do that to her.
I see what you're saying. You know what? You might be better. You might be right, because you got, at that point, maybe she really starts to fall for you over that 6-hour flight, and then you just got to let her down at baggage claim. That's rough.
Am I taking crazy pills? Is everybody delusional? Come on. Why can't you put him in his place, Tim, and say, you know what? You're delusional. You had no shot. You didn't speak to her because you knew you had no shot. Don't paint it out to be that you did her any kind of favor.
Don, it's so preposterous. I just assumed he was tongue-in-cheek the entire time.
No, he's been going on with this for an hour and a half.
It's so preposterous that there's a ring of truth to it.
Michael's a pretty smooth guy.
They ain't that smooth.
I'm pretty
not
smooth.
Porcelain.
All right, now, you have to be smooth with us here. Give us a compelling argument how the Nets could beat the Heat.
Honestly, I think that it's going to be a long series. So when you talk about long series, you're really talking about a handful of plays at the end of the game. And they had one of the most unique regular season series that I've ever seen. 3 one-point games, all won by the Nets, and the other went to overtime, won by the Nets. So you can expect these games. You might have one game that's a 15, 20-point game in the series. Most of them are going to come down to a handful of possessions in the fourth quarter. And if that's the case, when you have a team like Brooklyn that has guys like Joe Johnson, who, you say what you want about him. I know he's had some struggles in the playoffs, but he's also made a ton of big shots throughout his career. You have a Paul Pierce, you have Darren Williams, you have Kevin Garnett. You have guys that have been in big moments in their careers and have been the number one option in those moments. So no situation is really going to phase them. I know you could say the same thing about the Heat and what they've been through, but the Nets are a team that, number one, I think want to play them. They're not going to back down from them. They don't like them very much. And I think that that's going to mean some slower-paced fourth quarters, in which case execution and shot-making become everything, and Brooklyn has guys that can do that. So I don't think the Heat are going to blow this team out by any means. I think it's going to be a very close, long series. Not going to surprise me one bit if this went 7 games.
Who on Brooklyn concerns Miami the most?
I would say it's probably got to be Joe Johnson, because the one thing about Joe Johnson, it's really difficult to find a matchup for him. And if he gets it going with his isolation game, it could be a problem. And Dwayne Wade is a very good defensive player. Dwayne Wade is also undersized when it comes to playing a guy like Joe Johnson. And he gets to backing you down and gets into that ISO, I call it bully ball type of basketball. He can get on those type of roles where now you have to change the way you do things defensively, because the Heat don't double team a ton in those situations. They tend to play their wings, ISOs, straight up for the most part. They do some trapping on pick and roll out on the floor, and they're going to continue to do that. But they don't like to necessarily come double and leave open three-point shooters and let guys like Teletovic get involved in this series, because they think that with their speed, they can play straight up and not give up a lot of three-point shooting. That's their strategy. Joe Johnson can be a difference maker if that's the case. I think the Nets are really confident right now, winning a Game 7 on the road, playing the way they did the last 2 months of the season. I think that they're primed for this, and they're ready for this matchup.
All right, who ends up covering LeBron then for the Nets?
Well, obviously, Paul Pierce is going to get his fair share. Joe Johnson's going to get him some. Alan Anderson, they're going to run different guys at him. They don't have that, what you'd hope for. They have that 6'7", 6'8" stud athlete that can guard him, because that's really the best type of player to put on LeBron James. You can't put a guy typically on that's 6'5" and under, because they just don't have the reach or typically the physical strength to keep him from either shooting over the top or getting to the rim. You need a guy that's got long arms that can play off of a step, so that you're basically baiting him into shooting contested jump shots. They don't really have a guy, to me, that falls into that. So they're going to have to mix up who plays. And I don't think Paul Pierce is as equipped to play him as he was 3 or 4 years ago. He's a little bit tougher as far as his lateral speed now. So Jason Kidd is going to have to get creative on what he wants to do in terms of double teaming. You know, the Heat. The one thing about the Heat team, and other than they cruise through Charlotte, I don't think this is as good a three-point shooting team as the ones that have won championships and the teams that have gone to the finals previous to this. I think they're taking a little bit of a step back in that area. I think Ray Allen is what he was as a three-point shooter. Shane Battier has just phased out a little bit with that team. Mike Miller's now in Memphis. So some of the guys that have made big shots for this team the last 3 years aren't there or aren't as good as they were. And I think that is something that Jason Kidd can take to his advantage in terms of wanting to double team a little bit more.
Talking to our very own Tim Legler as we are a couple of days away from the Heat and the Nets, round number 2. Michael made this statement earlier. I agree. I want to see if you agree as well. The winner of this series represents the East in the final.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think we started talking about Brooklyn really being a team when Indiana started to collapse, 6-8 weeks ago. I think that's when everybody kind of started looking at Brooklyn the way they were playing as the team. Now, Indiana, I'm really curious to see what the Pacers do against Washington because there was so much going on with that team going into their first series. And to survive that, I'm just wondering how much of now almost they can relax and take a deep breath and realize they're not going to go down as one of the most colossal failures in the history of the league, which is what they would have been called if they lost to a 38-win Atlanta Hawks team in the first round. Now at least they've survived that. Now I know it would be an upset losing to Washington as well, but it's not a first-round series. They got through it. Washington plays legitimate bigs. Atlanta really didn't. So now Roy Hibbert, maybe he has a place in this series. If nothing else, at least defensively, he has an impact. So you might see Indiana kind of regain their footing now, hit the reset button, and win this series in 6 games. Then you might have to look at the Eastern Conference Finals differently. But right now, I would say, yeah, Miami or Brooklyn, whoever wins that series, it's got to be considered the favorite going into to win the East and get to the finals, unless we see something out of Indiana in this series that makes us think they've got it back on track.